in my intro to these questions about your 2014 book, Miracles, I say there are two kind of interesting worldview questions to me about God, but I think it boils down from all I read. And one is God real? Okay, I mean real like that. And is God a good idea? I mean, even if it's not real, it could be it's a good idea to have God and so on. And a lot of atheists are actually starting to think God's a good idea. But I'm interested in talking to you about, is God real?
Yeah.
And that's what I think you really wrote Miracles about to some extent.
That's right.
And then you got more into it here with the book, Is Atheism Dead? So my question about miracles, I'm going to flip the page here, and I'm only going to keep you for 15 minutes and get you out of here, is just asking you, this is a trick question, to define a miracle.
Well, in writing my book, Miracles, I wanted to define a miracle because I think people speak cavalierly and sloppily, generally speaking, and certainly about what is a miracle. They say, oh, the miracle of birth. What do you mean? On one level, it is an astonishing miracle, but people sometimes just talk of miracles like a cool thing, a great thing. A miracle, in the way that I am defining it in my book, Miracles, which is, I think, the biblical definition, it's the Greek word semeion. It's a sign. What is a sign? A sign from whom? To whom? It is God doing something to speak to us. So a miracle is God revealing himself in a way that makes us say, wow, that was a miracle. There was no way that could have happened. God is speaking somehow through the miracle. And so it's a high bar, right? In other words, if I say, wow, it's a miracle I passed that test, a miracle is not just something like, oh, how fortunate. A miracle is God revealing himself in a way that is absolutely astonishing, and that we realize that was God. Now, God can reveal himself in many ways. I mean, if somebody has cancer and you pray for them and the cancer goes away, you say, well, that's a miracle, right? If somebody hears, in many cases, there's a couple of stories in the book. Well, let me be clear. In the book Miracles, I said I only want to speak to people I know, except for I think in one case it was a friend of a friend, but people that I know, that I can trust, if they tell a story of a miracle, that you get the idea that this obviously actually happened. This is not just some story. So there are a lot of journalistic details that I put into each story, specifically so you understand we're not making this up. This is exactly what happened. And the details usually make you realize the miracle. It's the details. So when people speak sloppily, you say, wait a minute, what happened? You need the details. But in the book Miracles, I tell many, many stories of people that I know, of things that happened to them. And almost everyone is different, which is kind of the point, is that whenever God shows up, it's in a different way. I mean, or I shouldn't say whenever, but often God shows up in ways that are unique or specific to a person or to a story. And I've had many miracles that I did not put in the book, which I'm going to write a sequel to my memoir, Fish Out of Water, in where I tell from age 25 onward, I've experienced many, many miracles. I think I put 2 in my book, Miracles. But the point is that a miracle is when God reveals himself one way or the other, and that you know that was God. And that, again, that can be any number of things. In one case, I have a friend who ought to have drowned, who was far from shore, felt a giant hand drag her through the water up onto the beach. And then when she looked around, there was nobody there, no footprints. I mean, it was an angel. It was like that. So that's an angelic miracle. Now, again, if you know my friend, you know she's not making this up. Now, if you don't know her and you don't want to believe it, you can say, oh, she made it up. But I know this person. This is a very bright, sensitive, talented person giving me these details. There are many cases in the book like that where you just, you hear the story and you think, oh, holy cow, that's That's crazy. But because I know all of these people as not crazy, as not liars, as people who care about truth, I said I want to document these stories. Now, these are only stories of people that I know. Everywhere I go, I hear more stories like this. And I've known people in the past that have told these miracle stories. And so I thought it's important to document this. This is, let's call it anecdotal evidence for God. But it's kind of like we're trying to describe a reality. It's no less real than any reality. And so if you're living in the 18th century and somebody says, atoms exist, there in the future there'll be this thing called the periodic table, and there are all of these elements, and da-da-da, and you'd be like, what are you talking about? We can't see atoms. What are atoms? Show me the atoms. Well, you say it's real. Well, over time, people were able to do experiments and infer information, and then eventually infer more information, and then begin to put together a pattern of what was invisible to the naked eye, but eventually construct this, there's this reality. There are these chemicals, there are these elements. That's called doing science, right? And I think that the geography of the spiritual world is very similar. You hear anecdotal stories. If you hear enough of these stories, you begin to put together patterns, and you go, there's a reality here. We can't see it when we want, but clearly if you listen to all these stories, there's a reality here. And I think that we need to understand that the reality of God, the reality of eternity outside of time, it is as real, or actually infinitely more real than the material reality in which we live. And so I think we need to look at it really in a way through a scientific lens and say, let's look at it. Let's see, what do you think? Does this sound like a hallucination to you? What does this sound like to you? And so I make the case in my book Miracles to help people understand that this is real.